The morning sun was just peeking through the windows of a modest two-bedroom apartment in Atlanta when Ashley Johnson's alarm went off at 4 a.m. She couldn't help but smile, even at this early hour. Today wasn't just any ordinary day, it was the day her dream of studying in Paris would finally begin to take shape. Ashley, a 19-year-old sociology student at Georgia State University, had spent the last 2 years working part-time at a local coffee shop, saving every extra penny for this moment. Her small bedroom was a testament to her dedication. A Paris vision board hung above her desk, covered with pictures of the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, and candid shots of students sitting in quaint French cafes. "You got everything, baby?" Her mom called from the kitchen, where the smell of her famous blueberry pancakes was already filling the air. It was their special tradition, Mom's pancakes before any big event in Ashley's life, from her first day of kindergarten to her high school graduation. Going through the checklist one last time, Ashley replied, her hands trembling slightly as she double-checked her burgundy backpack. Her brand-new passport, which still had that fresh booklet smell, was safely tucked into a protective holder her grandmother had gifted her. Next to it lay her acceptance letter from Sciences Po, one of France's most prestigious universities, where she'd be spending the next semester. The kitchen scene that morning was pure joy mixed with nervous energy. Ashley's mom tried to hide her tears behind her coffee cup, while her little brother Danny, still in his Spider-Man pajamas, bombarded her with questions about French food and whether she'd be able to see the top of the Eiffel Tower from her dorm room. "Now remember," her mom said, sliding another pancake onto Ashley's plate, "you've got your power bank, your medications, the copy of your passport I made you." Her voice carried that familiar mix of pride and worry that only mothers seem to master. Ashley patted the front pocket of her backpack. "Everything's here, Mom. I've checked like 1,000 times." She couldn't help but laugh at her mother's concern, even though she'd probably check everything again herself at least 3 more times before reaching the airport. The drive to Atlanta International Airport was filled with early morning radio tunes and Ashley's excited chatter about her upcoming adventure. Her mom kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, probably trying to memorize every detail of her daughter's face before she left for the next 6 months. They arrived at the airport 3 hours early. Ashley's idea. Better safe than sorry, she'd insisted while planning her departure. The terminal was relatively quiet at this hour, with just a handful of early morning travelers wheeling their suitcases across the shiny floor. Standing in line at the check-in counter, Ashley couldn't help but notice a group of other students her age, probably headed to their own study abroad programs. Their excitement was just as palpable as hers, and she found herself wondering if she'd run into any of them in Paris. Her mom insisted on waiting with her until she reached the security checkpoint. They took countless selfies with Danny making funny faces in the background. "Send us pictures every day," he demanded, giving her the tightest hug his 8-year-old arms could manage. When the final call for goodbyes came, Ashley's mom pulled her close. "Your father would have been so proud of you," she whispered, referring to the dad Ashley had lost to cancer when she was 12. Ashley felt tears welling up but quickly wiped them away. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry today. As she walked toward the security line, Ashley felt like she was floating. Everything she'd worked for was finally happening. Her passport and boarding pass felt like golden tickets in her hands, each step taking her closer to making her dream a reality. Little did she know that her journey was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would test her resilience in ways she never imagined. But for now, in this moment, she was simply a young woman on the brink of adventure, her heart full of hope and her mind filled with dreams of the City of Light. After making it through security with plenty of time to spare, Ashley settled into the quiet rhythm of Terminal B. She treated herself to a warm chai latte from an airport cafe, something she'd been craving since waking up. The familiar taste helped calm her pre-flight jitters as she watched planes take off through the massive windows. Time passed quickly as she video-called her best friend Taylor, who was still in bed but insisted on being virtually present for Ashley's big moment. They chatted about everything and nothing, from Ashley's carry-on organization strategy to wild theories about French university life. Gate B23 to Paris, now beginning pre-boarding for passengers needing special assistance, the announcement echoed through the terminal. Ashley's heart skipped a beat. This was really happening. She gathered her belongings, double-checked her boarding pass, and made her way to the gate area. The scene at the gate was what you'd expect for an international flight. A mix of business travelers tapping away on laptops, families trying to keep young children entertained, and other students who, like Ashley, clutched their passports with barely contained excitement. That's when she first encountered Rita Sullivan, the senior flight attendant. Even from a distance, something felt off about Sullivan's demeanor. While other staff members greeted passengers with warm smiles, Sullivan's face remained fixed in what could only be described as a permanent scowl. Ashley observed as Sullivan processed other passengers' documents. Her interactions seemed brief but tense, especially with younger travelers. An elderly couple in front of Ashley whispered to each other about Sullivan's unnecessary roughness with their passports. When it was finally Ashley's turn, she stepped forward with her brightest smile. "Good morning," she said cheerfully, holding out her boarding pass and passport. Sullivan barely glanced at her before snatching the documents from her hands. "Where did you get this passport?" Sullivan's voice was sharp, cutting through the general murmur of the gate area. Several nearby passengers looked up from their phones. I got it from the passport office a few weeks ago," Ashley replied, her smile faltering slightly. She noticed Sullivan's grip on her passport tightening, the corners starting to bend under her fingers. "A few weeks ago?" Sullivan's voice dripped with suspicion. She flipped through the pages roughly, her actions becoming more aggressive with each turn. "This looks too new. Are you sure this is real?" Ashley felt her chest tighten. Of course it was real. She'd spent hours at the passport office getting everything processed correctly. "Yes, ma'am. I can show you my passport application receipt if you'd like. I have it right here in my bag." But Sullivan wasn't listening. She held the passport up to the light, turning it at different angles. By now, a small crowd had formed around them. Some passengers had their phones out, recording the increasingly tense interaction. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Sullivan announced loudly, "and I know what real passports look like. This paper feels wrong." She ran her fingers along the edges of the passport as if trying to peel the pages apart. A gentleman in a business suit stepped forward. "Miss, I don't think you should be handling her passport that way." His voice was calm but firm. Other passengers began to murmur in agreement. Ashley felt tears threatening to form but fought them back. "Please be careful with that," she said quietly. "I need it for my study abroad program." Her voice trembled slightly, but she maintained her composure. Behind Sullivan, another flight attendant, a younger woman named Amy, watched the scene with growing concern. She seemed to be speaking quietly into her radio, her eyes darting between Sullivan and Ashley. More passengers were gathering now. A woman with kind eyes mouthed, "Are you okay?" to Ashley from a few feet away. An older man in a university sweatshirt had already pulled out his phone and appeared to be dialing a number. The tension in the air was palpable. Sullivan's face grew redder by the second as she continued to scrutinize the passport. Her hands shook slightly, whether from anger or something else, it wasn't clear. What was clear was that this situation was about to reach a breaking point. Ashley stood her ground, though her heart was racing. Everything she'd worked for, the savings, the applications, the dreams, all hung in the balance as her passport remained in the grip of this increasingly agitated flight attendant. The next few moments would change everything, but not in any way Ashley could have anticipated. The gate area had fallen into an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the distant announcements echoing through the terminal. Ashley's hands were shaking slightly as she reached into her backpack, pulling out a clear folder containing her passport application documents. "I have all my paperwork here," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The receipt from the passport office, my application confirmation, everything." She held out the folder, but Sullivan didn't even glance at it. "Anyone can fake paperwork," Sullivan snapped, her voice growing louder. She was still gripping Ashley's passport, her knuckles white against the burgundy cover. "Do you know how many people try to get through with fake documents every day?" A middle-aged woman in a blue blazer stepped forward from the crowd. "I'm a high school counselor, and I've helped dozens of students with passport applications. That passport looks exactly like the ones my students receive." Her voice was calm but firm, carrying the natural authority of someone used to handling difficult situations. Sullivan's face flushed deeper red. Are you a passport expert? Are you trained in identifying fraudulent documents? She turned back to Ashley, her voice dripping with condescension. Where exactly did you get this? Some back alley office? Ashley felt her throat tighten, but she refused to let Sullivan see her cry. I got it from the official passport office downtown. I waited in line for 3 hours. The agent who helped me was named Mr. Chen. He had pictures of his grandkids on his desk. The details tumbled out as Ashley tried to prove the legitimacy of her documents. More phones were up now, recording the interaction. A young man in glasses who'd been quietly watching spoke up. This doesn't feel right. She's just a student trying to travel. Others nodded in agreement, and a low murmur of disapproval spread through the crowd. Amy, the younger flight attendant, had moved closer now. Rita, she said quietly, maybe we should call the supervisor to verify. I don't need a supervisor. Sullivan cut her off sharply. I've been doing this job longer than you've been alive. I know what I'm looking at. Her voice had taken on a shrill edge that made several nearby passengers wince. An elderly gentleman who'd been observing the scene stepped forward, leaning on his cane. Young lady, he addressed Ashley kindly. When was your passport issued? The exact date. July 12th, Ashley replied promptly. Just 3 weeks ago. That's why it looks so new. Ah, the gentleman nodded, turning to Sullivan. My granddaughter just got hers too. Same color, same texture. They've updated the design recently, you know. But Sullivan wasn't listening. She was now holding the passport up to the harsh fluorescent lights, turning it this way and that. The watermark looks suspicious, she muttered, though several passengers who could see the passport clearly were shaking their heads in disagreement. Ashley felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. A woman in her 30s had pushed through the crowd to stand beside her. I'm recording this, she whispered. Don't worry, sweetie. We're all witnesses here. The tension in the air was becoming unbearable. Some passengers were now openly calling for a supervisor. Others were on their phones, presumably contacting the airline's customer service. A few were live streaming the entire incident. Sullivan's behavior was becoming more erratic by the minute. She started flipping through the passport pages again, her movements aggressive and jerky. The stamp placement is all wrong, she declared, though there weren't any stamps in the brand new passport yet. Please, Ashley tried one more time, her voice barely above a whisper. That's my only passport. I need it for my study abroad program. I can prove it's real if you'll just look at my other documents. The crowd had grown larger now, with passengers from neighboring gates drawn by the commotion. Someone in the back shouted, "This is ridiculous. Let her board." Others joined in with similar sentiments. Amy was now speaking urgently into her radio, her eyes fixed on Sullivan's increasingly agitated movements. The passport in Sullivan's hands was visibly bent from her rough handling. Ashley stood her ground, though her legs felt weak. Everything she'd worked for hung in the balance. Her savings, her dreams of studying in Paris, the proud look in her mom's eyes when she'd received her acceptance letter. She couldn't let it all fall apart because of one person's inexplicable suspicion. What happened next would be captured on dozens of phones, shared thousands of times on social media, and change both Ashley's life and airline policy forever. The tension had reached its breaking point, and Sullivan was about to make a decision that would have consequences far beyond that gate at Atlanta International Airport. Time seemed to slow down in that crowded gate area. The air conditioning hummed overhead, mixing with the tense whispers of onlookers. Ashley watched, helpless, as Sullivan's face contorted with an emotion that went beyond mere suspicion. It was something darker, more personal. I'm going to show you exactly what we do with fake documents, Sullivan announced, her voice ringing through the terminal. Before anyone could react, she gripped both ends of Ashley's passport and with deliberate force began to tear it apart. The sound of ripping paper cut through the air like a gunshot. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Ashley's hand flew to her mouth, a strangled "no" escaping her lips as she watched her passport, her ticket to her dreams, being destroyed right in front of her eyes. Stop. The business-suited gentleman lunged forward, but it was too late. The passport was now in 2 jagged pieces, hanging limply from Sullivan's trembling hands. The holographic eagle on the cover page was split right down the middle, a fitting symbol for the moment. Ashley felt her knees go weak. The room started spinning slightly, and she might have fallen if not for the kind woman next to her who quickly wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Breathe, honey," the woman whispered. "Just breathe." The gate area erupted into chaos. Dozens of phones captured the moment, their camera flashes creating a surreal strobe effect. People were shouting, some calling for security, others demanding Sullivan's badge number. A young boy clutched his mother's hand and asked, "Why did the mean lady tear up her book?" Emmy, the younger flight attendant, finally broke free from her shock. Code red at gate B23, she spoke urgently into her radio. "I need supervisor assistance immediately. Security too." Her voice shook but carried the unmistakable tone of someone who knew they were witnessing something monumentally wrong. Sullivan stood there, still holding the torn pieces of the passport, as if suddenly realizing the magnitude of what she'd done. Her face drained of color, but instead of showing remorse, she doubled down. "This is what happens when people try to cheat the system," she declared, though her voice had lost some of its earlier conviction. The elderly gentleman with the cane stepped forward again, his voice carrying the weight of years of wisdom. "Young lady," he addressed Sullivan, "in all my years of traveling, I have never witnessed such a disgraceful abuse of power. You've just destroyed government property and violated this young woman's civil rights." Ashley couldn't hold back her tears anymore. They rolled silently down her cheeks as she stared at the mangled remains of her passport. All those hours at the passport office, the careful planning, her mum's proud smile when they'd finally received it, ripped apart in seconds of senseless cruelty. A group of 3 flight attendants from a neighboring gate rushed over, their faces showing a mix of horror and professional concern. One of them quickly approached Ashley. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "We're getting our chief supervisor right now. This should never have happened." The crowd had grown even larger, with passengers from other gates filming and calling out words of support to Ashley. A woman in a business suit was already on her phone with what sounded like the airline's corporate office. "Yes, I'm witnessing it right now," she said firmly. "This is completely unacceptable." Through her tears, Ashley caught glimpses of the shock and outrage on people's faces. An older woman was comforting a crying teenage girl who kept saying, "That could have been me." A father held his young daughter closer, whispering something in her ear that made her nod solemnly. The torn passport pieces now lay on the counter like evidence at a crime scene. Sullivan still stood there, her earlier bravado crumbling as the reality of her actions began to sink in. The sound of rapid footsteps approaching signaled the arrival of airport security and airline supervisors. Ashley pulled out her phone with shaking hands, barely able to type a message to her mom. Something terrible just happened. The 3 dots appeared immediately. Her mom was typing back. But before she could read the response, a tall man in an airline management uniform burst through the crowd, his face a mask of professional gravity. The next few moments would transform this personal tragedy into a watershed moment for airline policy and civil rights. But for now, Ashley could only stare at the torn pieces of her passport, each rip representing a dream that seemed to be slipping away with every passing second. The airline's chief supervisor, Mr. Thompson, moved through the crowd with the authority of someone used to handling crisis. His navy blue suit and silver name badge caught the fluorescent lights as he quickly assessed the scene. Behind him, 2 airport security officers created a professional barrier between Sullivan and the still-growing crowd. "Everyone, please step back and give us some space," Thompson announced, his voice calm but commanding. He turned to Ashley first, his expression softening. "Miss, I'm David Thompson, Chief Gate Supervisor. Are you all right?" Ashley nodded weakly, still supported by the kind woman who hadn't left her side. "My passport," she managed to say, pointing at the torn pieces still lying on the counter. Thompson picked up the damaged passport carefully, almost reverently, placing the pieces into a clear evidence bag. "I want you to know that this is completely unacceptable, and we're taking immediate action." He turned to the security officers. "Please escort Ms. Sullivan to the office, and make sure you get her credentials." Sullivan, who had been standing in shocked silence, suddenly found her voice. "You can't do this. I was just doing my job." That passport looked suspicious. Her words fell flat in the face of dozens of recorded videos showing otherwise. Your job was to check documents, not destroy them, Thompson replied firmly. Please go with these officers now. As Sullivan was led away, her face had lost all its previous arrogance, replaced by the dawning realization of what she'd done. A young woman from the crowd stepped forward, her phone still recording. I have the whole thing on video, from the moment she started questioning the passport. I've already uploaded it and it's getting shared like crazy. Others nodded, holding up their phones to show they had footage too. Thompson turned back to Ashley. Miss, would you be willing to come with me to our customer service office? We need to document everything and more importantly, we need to start fixing this. He gestured to a quieter area away from the gate. The kind woman who had been supporting Ashley squeezed her hand. Do you want someone to go with you, honey? I can delay my flight if you need support. Other passengers nodded in agreement, offering to be witnesses or provide their contact information. Ashley felt overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. Thank you, she whispered, but I think I'll be okay. She looked at her phone, seeing dozens of missed calls from her mom. I need to call my mother first. Of course, Thompson agreed. Take all the time you need. We'll handle rebooking your flight and getting emergency passport replacement assistance. He turned to address the crowd. I want to thank everyone for their support and for documenting this incident. Our airline has zero tolerance for this kind of behavior. As Ashley stepped aside to call her mom, Amy, the younger flight attendant who had tried to intervene, approached her with a bottle of water and some tissues. I'm so sorry, she said quietly. I should have done more to stop her. Ashley's hands shook as she dialed her mom's number. On the first ring, her mother's worried voice came through. Baby, what happened? Are you okay? Mom, Ashley's voice cracked. The flight attendant. She tore up my passport. She destroyed it. The reality of what had happened hit her all over again as she heard her mother's sharp intake of breath. She did WHAT. Her mother's voice rose in disbelief. Baby, I'm coming right back to the airport. Don't move. Don't sign anything until I get there. Thompson, overhearing the conversation, stepped closer. Miss, would you like me to speak with your mother? I can explain what happened and what we're doing to make this right. Ashley nodded gratefully, handing him the phone. Meanwhile, the gate area was still buzzing with activity. Airline staff were working quickly to rebook other passengers affected by the delay. The incident had caused a ripple effect through the terminal, with people sharing the story and video clips spreading rapidly across social media platforms. Security had cordoned off the area where the incident occurred, treating it like a crime scene. Several passengers who had witnessed everything were giving official statements to airline representatives and airport police, their faces still showing shock and anger at what they'd witnessed. The elderly gentleman who had spoken up earlier approached Ashley one last time before leaving. Young lady, what happened here today was wrong on every level. But looking at all these people who stood up for you, who recorded everything, justice will be served. Your dreams aren't torn up like that passport. They're just delayed a little bit. As Ashley waited for her mother to arrive, she watched airline staff efficiently managing the aftermath. New boarding passes were being printed, apologies were being made, and most importantly, a plan was being put in place to get her a new passport as quickly as possible. Thompson returned with her phone and a stack of papers. Your mother is on her way. In the meantime, I've already contacted our legal department and the State Department's emergency passport services. We're going to make this right, Ashley. What happened here today will never happen to another passenger again. Within an hour of the incident, the airline's corporate response machine was in full swing. The sleek conference room on the airport's executive level buzzed with activity as airline officials, legal representatives, and public relations experts worked to address the situation that was now trending nationwide on social media. Ashley sat between her mother and Mr. Thompson, watching as a team of airline executives filed into the room. Her mom hadn't let go of her hand since arriving at the airport 20 minutes ago, her protective energy filling the space around them. I'm Jennifer Parker, Executive Vice President of Customer Relations, a woman in a charcoal suit announced, taking the lead position at the table. Her face showed genuine concern as she addressed Ashley and her mother. First, let me express our deepest apologies for what happened today. There is absolutely no excuse for what occurred. Ashley's mother squeezed her hand tighter. Apologies are nice, but my daughter's dreams of studying abroad are falling apart as we speak. Her orientation in Paris starts in 3 days. Parker nodded, pulling out a folder. We understand completely. That's why we've already taken several actions. She began laying out documents on the table. First, Ms. Sullivan has been terminated, effective immediately. Her behavior violated every principle of our airline's service standards and basic human decency. Thompson leaned forward. We've also been in contact with the State Department's emergency passport services. They've agreed to expedite a replacement passport, and we're covering all associated fees. Additionally, Parker continued, we've arranged for you to fly first class on tomorrow morning's flight to Paris, once your emergency passport is processed. We'll also provide hotel accommodation near the passport office for tonight, and we're issuing a full refund of your original ticket, plus a travel voucher for future flights. The airline's legal counsel, a quiet man who had been taking notes, spoke up. We'd also like to offer compensation for the emotional distress and inconvenience caused. Our legal team has prepared an offer, but you're welcome to have your own attorney review it. As they discussed details, Ashley's phone kept buzzing with notifications. The video of the incident had gone viral, with hundreds of thousands of views and shares. News outlets were reaching out for interviews, and support messages were flooding in from around the world. There's something else, Parker added, her tone softening. We've received calls from several educational organizations offering to help. One of them is an international student exchange program that wants to provide you with a scholarship for your studies in Paris. Ashley felt tears welling up again, but this time they weren't from sadness. The nightmare was turning into something unexpected, a moment of change. Her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders, her own eyes glistening. Outside the conference room, the story was spreading like wildfire. The airline's social media team was working overtime, responding to thousands of comments and messages. Their official statement condemning the incident and announcing Sullivan's termination had already been shared millions of times. We're also implementing immediate changes to our training programs, Thompson explained. This incident has shown us where we need to improve. Every employee will undergo enhanced sensitivity training, and we're revising our document verification procedures. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young staff member entered with a tablet. Ms. Parker, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the State Department is on the line. They've expedited the passport replacement and can have it ready first thing tomorrow morning. Parker smiled warmly at Ashley. See? Things are already moving forward. We'll have a car ready to take you to the passport office at 7 a.m. As the meeting continued, Ashley thought about how differently this day had turned out from what she imagined. The cruel act of one person had revealed the kindness of countless others, from the passengers who stood up for her to the airline executives working to make things right. Her mother, ever practical, was reviewing the compensation documents with careful attention. "Baby, are you okay with all of this?" she asked softly. Ashley nodded, feeling stronger than she had all day. The morning's excitement about her journey had returned, transformed but not diminished. She might be delayed by a day, but her dream of studying in Paris was still very much alive. The corporate response team continued their work, phones ringing constantly with updates and news inquiries. But in that moment, sitting in the quiet confidence of corporate accountability and human compassion, Ashley realized that sometimes the worst moments can bring out the best in people and in institutions willing to acknowledge their mistakes and make them right. 1 year later, Ashley stood at the same gate in Atlanta International Airport, but everything felt different. The sun streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow on the busy terminal. She smiled, remembering how that challenging day had transformed not just her life, but airline policies nationwide. Her study abroad experience in Paris had been even more amazing than she imagined. The one-day delay turned out to be a blessing in disguise. She'd arrived in Paris with a story that immediately connected her with her fellow international students. Her French classmates had already seen the viral video, and her experience sparked important discussions about treating international travelers with respect. "Ready for your speech?" her mom asked, straightening Ashley's blazer. Today, Ashley wasn't traveling. She was here to speak at the airline's annual staff training conference about her experience. The airline had turned her incident into a powerful teaching moment. The conference room was packed with airline staff from across the country. Flight attendants, gate agents, and supervisors filled every seat, their faces attentive as Ashley took the podium. Her story had become a cornerstone of the airline's new training program on respectful customer service and bias prevention. A year ago, I stood at Gate B23 with a dream of studying in Paris, Ashley began, her voice clear and confident. What happened that day could have destroyed that dream. Instead, it taught me about the power of speaking up, standing together, and turning negative experiences into positive change. She shared how the incident had sparked a nationwide conversation about travel equality. Other airlines had reviewed and updated their own policies. The video of her experience, which had now been viewed millions of times, was being used in customer service training programs across various industries. The elderly gentleman who had supported her that day had become a good friend. Now retired, he volunteered at a local organization helping first-time international travelers navigate the passport and visa process. He often shared Ashley's story to encourage young people not to let setbacks stop them from pursuing their dreams. The most beautiful part, Ashley continued, gesturing to the audience, was seeing how many people stood up for what was right. Those passengers who recorded the incident, the flight attendant who called for help, and all the airline staff who worked to make things right. They showed that one person's prejudice doesn't represent everyone. In the audience, Amy, the young flight attendant who had tried to intervene that day, smiled encouragingly. She had been promoted to customer service trainer and often used her own experience from that day to teach new staff about the importance of speaking up against wrongdoing. The incident had created ripples of change throughout the travel industry. The State Department had streamlined its emergency passport replacement process. Airlines had strengthened their customer service training. And most importantly, travelers became more aware of their rights and responsibilities to support each other. Ashley's mom watched proudly from the side of the stage. Their relationship had grown even stronger through the experience. The daily video calls during Ashley's time in Paris had brought them closer, and her mom had even visited her in France, her first trip outside the United States. Because of what happened, Ashley concluded, I discovered that my voice matters. Each of us has the power to stand up for what's right. My torn passport became a symbol of something bigger, a reminder that when we work together, we can turn moments of injustice into opportunities for positive change. After her speech, a group of new flight attendants in training approached her. One of them shared how Ashley's story had inspired her to pursue a career in aviation, specifically to help make air travel more welcoming for everyone. The airline had kept its promises. Beyond handling the immediate situation, they had created a scholarship fund for minority students studying abroad, named in Ashley's honor. The program had already helped dozens of students achieve their international education dreams. As Ashley left the airport that evening with her mom, they passed by Gate B23. The gate looked the same, but a small plaque had been added to the wall, "Respect every journey." It was a simple reminder of how one moment of courage, supported by the kindness of strangers and the accountability of institutions, could create lasting change. Back in her apartment that night, Ashley looked at her new passport, now filled with stamps from her travels. Next to it sat a frame containing the two pieces of her old torn passport, not as a reminder of that difficult day, but as a symbol of how obstacles can become opportunities and how standing up for what's right can inspire others to do the same. Ready for dinner, baby? Her mom called from the kitchen. Ashley smiled, putting away her old passport. That torn document had taught her something powerful, that sometimes the most meaningful journeys aren't about the destinations we reach, but about the changes we inspire along the way.